Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I thought tonight I'd do a pair of kind of simple-ish earrings with some blue topaz stones hanging from them. It's getting towards summertime when I do 3 or 4 shows, and oftentimes earrings are big sellers, and I'm always trying to keep pace with the demand for those. So let's make a simple kind of pretty pair of earrings. I hope they come out nice, and I hope you like them. All right, well, let's get started. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks. This one's already full, but I wanted to show you the chart on the back. Most of the ones that I have for sale in my merch store have some kind of useful information about metalsmithing. This one has fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters. I found that one really useful. The one I'm using right now has flow temperatures of different solders and stuff like that. The real feature for me, though, is the dot matrix in the background here, because it allows me to draw better pictures, because I'm not particularly good at drawing two-dimensionally, so it helps me out a lot. And it also allows me to keep a record of the pieces I've made, which I find super useful, because that way you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to do something similar. So get yourself a couple of those. They're really handy. This is what I have for a plan today. Like I said, it's not going to be terribly complex. I picked out a couple of blue topaz, supposing I didn't lose them already. There's one of them. Okay. They're about 5x7s, I think. For this part, I'm going to use some 18 gauge sheet. I'm going to texture it with a hammer to give it kind of a hammered look. And then we'll dome it slightly, and then we'll drill a couple of holes in it. I'm going to use a piece of 18 gauge wire likely to attach through that hole to the outside of this bezel down here, so the stone will be kind of hanging down there. And I think it'll be a pretty earring. This kind of texture really catches the light nice, and I like on earrings, I like them to really catch the light because it draws your attention to a person's face, I think. So I think it'll make for a pretty one, and not too hard to do. So let's start by making a bezel for this guy. I pre-made the other one just to save time. But we're going to use what's normally 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip. I'm going to cut it down just a skosh because it doesn't need to be that tall. And so what I'll do is I'll measure with this piece, and then we'll scribe a line and just trim it down shorter. You can also just buy a shorter bezel if you prefer. I just like keeping one kind around mostly. If you're new to my channel and you haven't seen my torch setup and everything, here's some information about the solder I use, the torch I use, flux, all that kind of stuff. But if you ever have any other questions about anything, feel free to ask in the comment section. If I know the answer, I'll give you an answer. So I set these calipers at the width that I wanted this to be. It's just a little bit shorter. I'm just going to scribe a line. I really need to clean my table up here. I keep knocking things on the floor when I just move around. I always wished I was a little bit more organized, but that does not seem to be my natural state. Okay, so let's make this into kind of a rectangle shape, or a square, to solder it. I find that that makes it easier to solder, for me. Not everybody does that, and that's fine. If it helps you, do it. If it doesn't, then don't do it that way. Okay, so we got them kind of pushing together, which is a desirable thing. The reason that is because if when silver gets heated, if you're new to this, it starts to anneal, which means the springiness starts to go out of it, and it's going to start to pull apart and slump if it's not pushing together pretty hard. And then you end up with a bad solder joint. And then all your friends would say, I really like what Chad's doing, but these bezels always got a big split in them. How embarrassing. Nobody wants that. Alright, so let's put a little piece of solder on here. One of the things people do when they're new to it is they spend a lot of time melting bezels. And the reason is there's so little metal there, it takes very little time for it to reach that flow temperature. And people are watching it, and then the solder flows and they keep heating it while they're watching it, and for some reason they just keep the heat on there. I'm not sure what it is, but it is a common thing. So it's best if you get the heat off of there as quickly as you can once it flows. At least flows completely. Occasionally get the person who's a little too jumpy and pulls back before it completely flows. So neither one of those situations would be ideal. So for this kind of a bezel with a faceted stone, since it's got a pointed bottom part, which is called the pavilion, you can't really set it closed backed with the flat back. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't look nearly as nice as it looks when it has an open back. And so what we're going to do is just create a little step inside of the bezel out of some wire. And that'll allow the edge of the stone to sit on the step while some light gets to it from the back. And displays it as best we can get it to. You can use an oval bezel mandrel if you have one of those to do this kind of stuff. I just kind of like to do it by hand. I think we're within the size range. So to make that step, I'm going to use some 18 gauge round. I have a little bit right here. And let's file the end flat. And I'm going to make two different layers out of this stuff that are nice and oval and fit in there hopefully pretty well. There's other ways to make steps and bezels, but this is kind of a quick, easy way. I generally cut these slightly long and then snip out little pieces until it fits in there perfectly. That way you end up with, you don't have an unsightly gap on the bottom. Just a little big still, so let's snip a little piece out. So that's still pretty tight, and when I pushed it in there it tried to ride up the side. And you definitely don't want it to do that because it won't create a flat platform for your stone to sit on. So. Also, if you're new to this, probably don't use faceted stones for this part. At least until you've made a few faceted stone bezels. You could just as easily use some nice cabochons. Most people start off making bezels for cabs versus faceted stones, so that's not bad. I don't think I got it perfectly oval, but probably good enough. That looks like that'll work okay. So we'll put one on top of the other one. I usually put the one that fits tighter on the bottom. Because that's the only one you'll really see. And make sure they're pushed all the way down and not wobbly or anything. Sometimes you get them where they're kind of like this. And that doesn't work very well. So, okay, let's solder those in there. The easiest way to solder these in is to, for me anyway, position a few pieces of solder underneath it. Flux it, and we'll set it right on top of there and heat it from the outside, and that should make it kind of suck it right up in. I usually give it just a little bit of file up on the back to kind of flatten it out and make it look nice. That looks pretty good. Alright, now I found a bit of scrap 18 gauge that I'm chopping things off of, and it's got enough space to do two of these little ovals. I used a little template to scribe them out. Have one right there and one right there. So I think we don't have any inside curves or anything, so I can actually just cut these out with the shears that I use. 18 gauge is about as thick as you want to do with this. This might be a little thinner than 18. It'll work though. Of course, if you prefer sawing with something like this, you can. There's no reason you couldn't do that. Now I'm just going to kind of file that smooth. I think these should be pretty layered. You could do a lot of things with these discs too. You could texture them with a rolling mill, or stamp some little messages on them. Those look pretty similar. Let's do a little, I'm going to use my chasing hammer's little peen on the back here. Let's see if we can kind of beat that up pretty good. Let's see how those look together. I think those are nice. So I was going to drill them after I domed them, but I think I'm going to drill them first. So let's make a little mark to drill these. They're pretty good, I guess. So you can use a center punch or whatever to make a little dimple here before we drill it. I'm going to use a tiny little ball burr because it won't deform the metal anymore. I guess it doesn't matter that much on this one, but I tend to get a more accurate spot for the hole to be drilled if I start it with a little ball burr. So let's go do that. Hopefully you can see how small that little ball burr is. Okay, hopefully we can get it in here and get a little bite on this one. Okay, got 4 holes. So we're going to dome these just a skosh. And so let's put them in. Oh, actually, let me file the back just a little bit. I probably should have used a little diamond burr to get the rest of that off of the back. There's little rough spots sticking out where I drilled. So let's kind of tap this down into a little bit of a dome. I don't want to get too aggressive because I don't want to knock all of the texturing out that I did already. And I still want it to have just a little bit of a curve. So a couple things we need to do now. We need to make something to attach to these 2 bezels that we can hook through here and maybe solder closed. And then I need to put a little jump ring on the top because I think if I put a jump ring rather than do the ear wire right through there, it's going to get a little bit better movement, and I like to have a little bit of swinging with the earrings. So let's solder on a little bit of 18 gauge round. Let's make sure this goes first. Sure. Okay, I wanted it to move easily. So these don't have to be terribly long, I shouldn't think. Let's file. I didn't make them very long on the picture. You don't want to get your earrings so long that they lay on your shoulders, so we'll try not to get too crazy about the length. Let's make sure we got some good solder here. Let's see how those look. Cool them off and make sure they're on there pretty solidly. Up there maybe. Find my round erase. It's pretty far up. Let's cut that and see how it looks. That's pretty long. Let's move that down just a skosh. Okay, let's put a jump ring on each of these. I'm going to make that out of 18 as well. So let's figure out how big we want it to be. Let's try this one and see how it looks. That should stick out enough, I think. We need enough sticking above the sheet in order to attach the ear wire to. So let's just cut a couple of these off. Okay, so we're going to try and just pick solder these closed without, hopefully without accidentally soldering them to anything. That would not be good. By the way, this is called pick soldering. It's one of the skills that probably changed my abilities the most as far as becoming a silversmith. So if you're interested, there's a video about it up there. It will allow you to do a lot more things than you can do before learning how to use that. Before learning how to do that. Use that. Do that. One of the reasons we can get by with just using all hard silver solder on this one is this is a separate piece from this over here, and I don't really want anything over here to flow anyway, so I'm just going to heat this piece to get it to solder right there. Same way on this one. So if we're really lucky, we won't overheat things or have any problems. You can also use medium or easy solder if you wanted to. I don't think I got the first one. I think those will be pretty. So for ear wires, I use 20 gauge, and let's just go ahead and put them on here. Cut a couple of pieces about 3 inches long. I'm going to make a loop. About an inch in, like that. Maybe 3/4 of an inch. 2.5 centimeters or 2 centimeters, somewhere in that range. Spread it open like that. Down there. Close that up. And then I'm actually going to right where the two come together here. And straight up. I'm going to try to. Like that. I'm going to wrap it twice around. Snip it off there. And we'll throw it in the pickle for a while. At the end, I'll shape these into French hooks. Not sure why they're French, but you know. One of my patrons lives in the Swiss Alps. Maybe he'd know. What do you think, Jean-Michel? Is this Swiss wires instead of French wires? What do you think? Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to let those pickle for a while, get them polished up, and I'll probably set one of the stones in front of you, and then I'll make one of these into an ear wire. So, simple, but I think those will be elegant, and I suspect if you made a little kind of assembly line, you'd be able to crank those out pretty quickly, probably, whether you use faceted stones or just some other kind of cabochon or something. So tell me what you think at the end, and make sure to leave a comment. I'd love for suggestions, constructive criticism, all of that kind of stuff is really appreciated. So I've got my pieces polished up here. I already set one of the stones. I'll show you two of them together in a minute, but I filed down this this bezel until it was just about the right height, just barely over the girdle. I do this a little differently than some. I use the flat side of my chain nose to kind of be a bezel pusher. So I'll just kind of push that straight in to start with. It's easier to do this kind of stuff if you have a little bit bigger piece, but you can also secure it in a vise or something if you prefer. Once you get it to stop moving or anything, you can start burnishing it. That's why we'll use this rounded outer part here and rub that top edge. I will clean those up on the top with a blue fine silicone polishing wheel, but let's go ahead and shape the ear wire. I'm going to bend it slightly towards the front, just a little bit in front of the earring, like that. I usually use a pencil or a pen, a round one, and bend it around it like this to make the ear hook. And then if you push in with your finger just a little bit like that, a pretty nice French wire shape. I usually do them both. I usually cut these off just about where they attach to the earring, maybe slightly higher. Then I'm just going to tweak the end of each of these just a little bit. Yeah, I'll get those shined up a little bit better. See if I can't get some good pictures of them. You know, let me know what you think. Let me know what you would have done differently. I always like to hear people's ideas. So, all right. Okay, well that was the Blue Topaz textured oval dangle earrings. I'm not sure what we're going to call them yet. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button. That really helps me out a lot. I'd also love it if you'd go visit my main channel page on YouTube here. I have well over 600 videos now. I do 3 per week, and I've been doing that for about 4 years, so there's quite a bit of content there. I think you're almost certain to find something useful or valuable to you as a metalsmith, and if not, at least something interesting to watch. So check it out. I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. That's doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me out a lot, and it makes it easier to find my videos. So I'd like to thank some groups of people. The first group are my patrons over on Patreon. They are my core group of supporters. I have a brand new one, Matthew S. Thank you for signing up. I think you'll find that it's a really nice group of people over there with a lot of great ideas and a lot of knowledge that you can tap into. Thank you to my previous patrons as well. You've really turned it into a nice place, and I appreciate your support. I couldn't do it without your help, so thank you. The other group are my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 27,700 subscribers, and that's amazing. Thank you for that. I really get a lot out of the comments that you leave. Thank you for sharing your stories, ideas for videos, constructive criticism, information that I don't know that you know. I really appreciate that kind of stuff because it helps me to learn and become a better silversmith. So, thank you also for the financial support. The Buy Me a Coffees, the Super Thanks, the merch purchases, the ebook purchases, all of that stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I really couldn't do it without your help, so thank you for that. Last, don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's information about this video, but there's also a few important links. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that platform, and I'd love it if you check that out. It's a nice place over there, like I said, and maybe you want to become part of that community as well. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I showed you at the beginning. I find those super valuable for keeping track of my projects and drawing better pictures. Finally, there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's YouTube tutorials. I did roughly 170 of them last year, and there's a page for each one with a link to the video. It also includes a picture of the sketch I drew prior to making the video, a picture of the final outcome, a list of materials that it takes to make the piece, stone information if it has a stone, difficulty rating, and finally some notes I made about it, things that I might not have mentioned in the video, things I learned from the process of this one. I'm usually doing something I've not tried before, so I'm almost always learning something new. Things I might do differently if I was to repeat the process. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips and a nice way to support my channel. You can even get all 3 years I've done that for a discount. There's a package deal for 2023, 2024, and 2025. So check it out. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.